She changed the locks while I was at the clinic. Just like that. No warning, no text, no sticky note on the fridge like the old days when we'd leave reminders about groceries or dentist appointments. I stood on the porch of the little ranch house in Maple Grove, the one with the cracked sidewalk and the maple that drops helicopters every June, fumbling with the key that had opened this door for 41 years. It scraped, caught, then stopped cold. The deadbolt laughed at me with its new, shiny indifference. That click wasn't metal on metal. It was a period at the end of a sentence I never saw coming. You're done here. The air smelled like cut grass and distant barbecue, the kind of Saturday in late May when neighbors fire up grills and kids scream on trampolines. I'd only been gone 3 hours. A routine mammogram, the kind you schedule because your doctor says better safe and you nod because you've outlived your husband by 15 years and figure why tempt fate. I'd left a casserole in the oven on warm chicken and wild rice, Mark's favorite from when he was 10 and picky about vegetables. I'd even texted Sarah, back by 2. Casserole in oven. Help yourself. A little heart emoji because that's what mothers do, even when the daughter-in-law treats you like a live-in maid with arthritis. I tried the key again, slower this time, as if patience might convince the lock to remember me. Nothing. My hands, veined and spotted like autumn leaves, started to tremble. Not from age. From the sudden, sharp understanding that this wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I pressed the doorbell. The chime still played that same 4-note tune Mark picked out when he was 8, something from a cartoon I can't recall. No answer. I knocked, my knuckles aching against the wood with painted sage green the summer Tom died. Still nothing. Through the sidelight window, I could see my Afghan draped over the couch exactly where I'd left it, but the throw pillows were new gray, impersonal, like hotel decorations. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from the clinic, all clear. Celebrate with ice cream. I stared at the exclamation points until they blurred. I dialed Mark. Straight to voicemail. His voice, recorded years ago when he still sounded like my boy. You've reached Mark Ellis. Leave a message or text. I did both. Mark, it's Mom. I'm locked out. The locks are changed. Call me. My voice cracked on the last word, but I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears were there, hot and waiting, but something colder had settled in my chest. First recognition. This was the culmination of 1,000 small erasures. I sat on the porch step, the concrete warm through my slacks. The hydrangeas I'd planted the year Sarah moved in were blooming purple, fuller than ever because I'd babied them through last year's drought. My garden gnome, the one Tom bought me as a joke after our Vegas trip, stared up with his painted smile. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. The sun climbed higher, turning the air thick. A neighbor walked by with her labradoodle. Everything okay, Evelyn? She asked, slowing. I forced a smile that felt like lifting weights. Just waiting for Mark. Forgot my key. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on my overnight bag, the one I'd packed for what was supposed to be one night at book club, extended because Sarah said she needed space to host her branding retreat. Space. That's what she'd called it when they moved in 6 months ago. Mark's startup had folded, Sarah's influencer gigs dried up, and suddenly my 3-bedroom with the finished basement was the perfect transitional space. I'd said yes because that's what you do when your only child looks at you with eyes that still, somehow, belong to the boy who needed stitches after falling off his bike. Because Tom had always said family first. Because the alternative was admitting I'd become extraneous in my own life. They'd arrived with U-Haul boxes labeled in Sarah's perfect calligraphy, kitchen essentials, wellness corner, vision board supplies. My first clue was when she rearranged my spice rack alphabetically. Chaos breeds anxiety, she'd said, not looking up from her phone. Mark had laughed, the sound brittle. Mom's spices have character. Character. Like me. Something to be tolerated until the new aesthetic took over. I tried the door one more time, more out of ritual than hope. Then I noticed the discreet sign taped inside the window. New locks installed 5/18. Premier Security Solutions. Yesterday, while I was at book club discussing a novel about a woman who disappears herself piece by piece. The irony tasted metallic. Their SUV was in the driveway, washed and waxed, The one I'd co-signed for when Mark's credit took a hit. I could see Sarah's yoga mat through the back window, rolled neatly beside her crystal water bottle. I walked around to the garage side, peered through the window. My Christmas decorations, 40 years of ornaments, the nativity scene Tom carved, were stacked in boxes marked seasonal, donate, in Sarah's handwriting. My throat closed. I slept in my Buick that night, parked 3 houses down under the streetlight that flickers every 7 seconds. The seat reclined just enough to cramp my hips, but not enough to let me forget where I was. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to pee in the Starbucks cup I'd saved from earlier, the one with the mermaid logo staring at me like she knew my shame. The dashboard clock glowed green. I thought about driving to my sister in Wisconsin, but the shame was heavier than the distance. How do you explain to family that your son locked you out of the life you built for him? Morning came slow, the sky the color of weak coffee. I watched from my car as the garage door opened at 6:42. Sarah emerged in running gear that cost more than my first car, AirPods in, ponytail swinging like a metronome. She didn't glance toward the porch. Didn't see her mother-in-law's life rearranged on the lawn like a yard sale of memories. Because that's what she'd find when she returned. I'd called Ernie at 5:30 a.m., the locksmith who'd installed our original deadbolts back when Mark was in diapers. His voice was gravel and sleep. "Evelyn, that you?" I'd cried then, the sound small and foreign in my throat. "I need my house back, Ernie." He didn't ask questions. Just said, "Give me an hour." By 7:15, the locks were mine again, brass, solid, the kind that require effort to turn. Ernie handed me 3 keys on a ring shaped like a house. "You sure about this?" He'd asked, eyeing the boxes I'd already carried out, Sarah's diffuser that smelled like money and entitlement, her white noise machine, the framed print that said good vibes only in cursive I'd come to hate. Never been more sure. I'd said and meant it with every aching bone. I worked methodically, not in anger that would come later, in waves that left me shaking. This was surgery. Precise. The master bedroom first, where my cedar chest had been relegated to the closet corner. I dragged it back to its spot by the window, opened it to air out the lavender sachets I'd sewn from Tom's old shirts. Then the kitchen. My cast iron skillet, wedding gift from Tom's mother, back on its hook. The cookie jar shaped like a chicken, the one Mark used to raid for Oreos. I found my recipes in a box labeled miscellaneous papers, Sarah's handwriting again. By 9:30, the lawn looked like a life exploded. Suitcases lined up like soldiers. Showboxes stacked neatly, designer labels I'd never understand paying for. Her vision boards, carefully rolled. The blender that sounded like a jet engine. I placed her silk robe on top of the pile, the one she'd worn while telling me my morning coffee routine was disruptive to her cortisol levels. The grass was damp with dew, soaking through my slippers, but I didn't care. This was reclamation. At 9:47, the front door opened from inside. Mark stepped out first, hair tousled, wearing the pajamas I'd bought him last Christmas. He stopped short at the sight of his life on the lawn. Sarah followed, phone in hand, mid-text. Her face went through stages. Confusion, recognition, something that might have been fear if she were capable of it. "Mom." Mark's voice cracked like it used to when he was 13 and caught lying about homework. I stood by the hydrangeas, hands clasped to keep them from shaking. "Good morning. What is this?" Sarah's voice was sharp, the one she used for customer service representatives who dared question her. "Your things," I said calmly. "On my lawn." Mark took a step forward. "Mom, we can explain." "There's nothing to explain." My voice didn't waver. "You changed the locks on my house. Without discussion. Without warning. While I was at a doctor's appointment you knew about." Sarah opened her mouth, closed it. For once, no scripted response about boundaries or energy or whatever influencer speak she used to justify cruelty. "I gave you a home when you needed it," I continued, looking at Mark. "I moved my life into one room so you could have space. I learned to tiptoe in my own hallways. I ate dinner at 5:30 because Sarah needed silence after 6. I found my photographs in the garage, labeled clutter. My mother's china in a box marked fragile but dated." Mark's face crumpled. "Mom, I didn't, you did." I met his eyes, saw the boy who'd skinned his knee on this very driveway, who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd promised to take care of me when Tom had his first heart attack. You let her do this. You chose convenience over family. You chose her vision of perfection over the woman who changed your diapers in this house. Sarah found her voice. This is dramatic. We were going to talk when you got back. Talk. I laughed, the sound rusty. Like all those times you talked about how my furniture depressed you. How my cooking smelled up the house. How I should consider assisted living because, and I quote, this place is too much for one person. Mark reached for me. I stepped back. The distance felt like miles. The locks are changed back, I said. Your things are outside. You have 30 minutes to load what you need. I'll be inside. When you're done, leave the garage opener on the porch. I turned then, walked up the steps I'd painted with Tom the summer Mark started kindergarten. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them. Mark stood frozen, staring at the life he'd built on my erasure. Sarah began photographing everything evidence, probably, for whatever narrative she'd spin later. But her hands shook. I made tea. My tea, from the tin I'd hidden behind the flour because Sarah said caffeine past noon disrupted sleep cycles. The kettle whistled like it used to, before I learned to fill it only halfway to avoid noise complaints. I sat at my table, scarred from years of homework and Thanksgiving turkeys, and drank slowly. The house smelled like lemon polish and possibility. 28 minutes later, the SUV backed out. Mark looked toward the house once, his face a map of regrets he might never voice. Sarah didn't look back. The lawn was empty except for one forgotten item, the Good Vibes only print, face down in the grass. I left it there. The rain would take care of it. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. The same one who'd handled Tom's estate, who'd patted my hand and said, "You're stronger than you know, Evelyn." I scheduled an appointment for Monday. The will would change. The house would stay mine, in writing this time, not just memory. Mark would inherit only what he earned through presence, not presumption. I baked cookies. Chocolate chip, extra chips. The kind Mark used to eat by the handful while doing algebra at this same table. The smell filled the house like forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. I ate 3, standing at the sink, watching the street where kids rode bikes and a couple walked their new baby in a stroller that cost more than my first car. The phone rang at 7:12. Mark. I let it ring. Then came the text. "Mom, please. We need to talk." I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I deleted the message, not out of spite, but clarity. Some conversations required preparation. Some required absence first. That night, I slept in my own bed. The sheets smelled like my detergent, not the lavender pod Sarah insisted on. The ceiling fan turned slow circles, the same rhythm it had kept since 1998. I listened to the house settle around me, the creak of the floorboard by the bathroom, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of the neighbor's dog. My house. My sounds. My life. In the morning, I found the gnome had been righted. Someone, Mark, probably, had placed him back by the hydrangeas, facing the street like a sentinel. There was a note tucked under his hat, written in the handwriting I taught him in 2nd grade. "I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this. But I'm trying to learn." I left the note where it was. Some things needed time to breathe. Some apologies needed to prove themselves in actions, not words. I watered the flowers instead, my hands steady in the dirt that had held every season of my life. The sun warmed my back, and for the first time in months, I didn't flinch at my own shadow in the window. The house stood quiet around me, not empty, full. Full of the years Tom and I painted walls at midnight because we couldn't afford help. Full of Mark's first steps in the hallway, his first heartbreak on the porch swing, his graduation photos still in frames Sarah had relegated to the basement. Full of me, finally taking up the space I'd earned. I made coffee. Strong, the way Tom liked it, in the pot that gurgled like an old friend. Sat at the table with the newspaper spread wide. No one to tell me the ink smelled or that the pages took up too much room. The maple leaves rustled outside, green and insistent. Life, continuing. My phone buzzed, a text from my book club friend. "Missed you last night. Everything okay?" I smiled, typed back, better than okay. Reclaiming my space. Join me Thursday. We'll discuss the book and the revolution. I set the phone down, picked up my mug. The coffee was perfect. The house was mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, so was I.